I'd like you all to think back of when you were in grade school or high school, college, and you take a test. And I think it's human nature after you take a test, you all want to know, how did you do? I think the same can be said for what we do here at Speechcrafters or at Toastmasters. When you give a speech and you get done, you want to know how you did. And in this venue, there's essentially three main areas of how you find out and get feedback of how you did. There's, well, at least in Toastmasters, I'm not quite sure of what you do in Speechcrafters, but in Toastmasters, the first way is people write out comments on a piece of paper. The second way is you have a video camera that captures your presentation. And then the third way is an oral presentation, which is what I'm going to cover tonight. So for the next few minutes, I want to talk about what I feel are the key ingredients of an effective evaluation of a speaker. And where I'd like to start is really going into it with a certain mindset. I think we have to go into an evaluation with this principle, and that is the speaker deserves and wants your feedback. It is your obligation to give them your feedback. And oftentimes what I perceive is that there's this component of fear. If you are a less tenured speaker and you are asked to give an evaluation of someone who you perceive is a better speaker, you feel like, well, who am I to tell this person that they're not doing so well, or you need to work on this, or you need to work on that. You need to get away from that mentality. I have yet to see Winston Churchill or JFK walk through any of our doors to give a speech. Everybody has something that they can improve upon. So that would be point number one, is come into an evaluation knowing that the speaker deserves and expects your feedback. So what do I think are the key objectives of an effective evaluation? I've mapped it out, that I've boiled it down to about 5. The place that I think you should start is with the objectives themselves. In Toastmasters, you have your manual. The manual has speeches in the manual, and they all have the objectives. So there's a little black box that gives the 2 or 3 objectives of what that speaker is trying to accomplish for that given speech. So, for example, this particular speech is on the abstract concept. The objectives are to research and analyze an abstract concept, theory, historical force, or social political issue. Present the ideas in a clear, interesting manner. Now, instead of when you get up to give an evaluation, and by the way, I think it's important to immediately remind the audience what the objectives are, because by the time they have spoken, have sat down, other people have gotten up to speak, and then you get up to give your evaluation, the audience has probably forgotten what the speech was about to begin with. So it's important to start with what those objectives are. But also, I think it's as important is to put the objectives in your own words. Don't just recite what it said. Say, as you may recall, the objective of this speech tonight was for this person to do a presentation on a specific issue and present it in a clear and interesting manner. And then go on to describe things about the speech that supported those objectives. So, number 1, start with the objectives. Number 2, I think it's very critical to sit back and listen to what the speaker is saying. Again, I'll go back to my analogy of school, whether it's college or high school. You're sitting in the audience, the professor is up giving a speech or giving a presentation, and you get so wrapped up into writing all your notes down that you're losing sight of what this person is trying to communicate. Because in essence, when somebody's speaking, you're really evaluating 2 things. You're evaluating what they said and how they said it. So the best thing to do is to sit back and listen to that, and in that context, just be assessing what are they saying and how are they saying it, and focus on those 2 areas. The third thing I would say is when you're giving feedback, try to limit it to 3 key points. I think people remember things easier in three things. Don't just give a laundry list of the person did this, they did this, they did this. Try to limit it on 3 things. Maybe 2 things about the speaker and 1 thing about the speech itself. 2 things about the speech itself, 1 thing about the speaker. So for instance, as an example, you might say, Alan, I heard your speech. I thought you did a fantastic job in the enthusiasm in which you presented the speech. I thought it was very clever in the way that you used analogies to bring out the topic, and I also thought that you had it organized in an exceptional way. So you're focusing on enthusiasm, the fact that it was clever, and the fact that it was organized, and then you can just tailor your supporting points around those three key areas. Now, for the big one, improvement. This is where everybody gets a little concerned about how am I going to offer up improvement in a way that is going to be palatable to the person hearing it, and it's going to come off as having value for the speaker themselves. First and foremost, just be specific. So for instance, if you have a newer speaker, like I'm assuming most of you in this room are newer speakers, it is likely that most of the time when you get up to speak in the beginning, you might feel nervous. Maybe your gestures aren't what they probably should be. Maybe your eye contact is something that could be worked upon. But instead of just going through this, this, and this, pick out something. Pick out one thing. Don't just go on everything. So pick out one thing. And when you pick that one thing out, give an example of how they could improve upon it. So let's say it's eye contact. Don't just tell the individual, one area of opportunity is improving on your eye contact. Say something like, you know, I noticed that when you're presenting, you spend most of your time looking off to the left side of the room, and that you're missing people in the back of the room, and you're missing people to the right of the room. Maybe what you can do is, before you get up to speak, pick out Carl in the back of the room, pick out Pat to the right of the room, and when you're speaking, you'll remember, your brain will say, I need to speak to Carl at some point during this speech, and then I need to look over and talk in Pat's general direction. So give specific, concrete reasons on how and ways that they can improve. And the last thing I would say is try to take a unique or interesting angle on an evaluation, because at some point you're going to be hit with someone or something in a speech that is a little unsettling, and you're going to ask yourself, what do I do with this? I was in a speech contest, and the speaker was a stutterer. They stuttered, and it wasn't just a slight stutter, it was a very noticeable stutter from start to end. And I thought, what am I going to do with this? And as I listened, I thought, you know, this speech isn't really about what he was talking about, which was Italy and the cuisine in Italy and the architecture in Italy. This was about his lifelong struggle with getting up and pushing himself to speak. So that was what the angle that I took in terms of the evaluation, and encouraged him to keep pushing himself and to keep fighting it, because you're very brave when you do that. So that was the angle that I took in the evaluation. So in summary, what I would say is, you owe it to the speaker to give feedback. Be specific, be clear, be concise, keep it conversational, try to focus on 2 or 3 things, and always, always, always go in with the mindset they deserve and expect your feedback. Thank you.